All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying your Christmas. I am continuing with my non-politics gaming week here, and it's Boxing Day, which means we are looking at the colony sim, or the colony management sim, the base builder, a genre basically invented by Dwarf Fortress. And let me just, first of all, before we get into the list itself, which is a straightforward top 10, subjective in my opinion, but also pretty much objective as well, if you ask me. Let me just try to outline what it is I like about this genre. There's really three components. I've thought long and hard about this. There are three components that I think there are three different itches these games scratch. And in fact, what I'll do when I go through them, I'll talk about each of these three categories and, how hard it itches each particular one. So the first thing is simply just design itself. It's giving you an opportunity to design something. Carving out the base, digging out the mountain, building the walls, designing the different rooms. There's an architect element. Okay, so let's call factor one the architect element, okay? Or the architect factor, all right? The architect factor. So the second factor then is what I shall call the engineering factor. That is, these are games that present complex problems that require solutions. And you come up with those solutions, and the solution in itself creates some new problem, which you then have to engineer another solution for. And round it goes. So you end up with a pretty complex engineered situation. Now, some games do this more than others, as we'll see, but that's the second factor, the engineering factor. And the third factor is dying is fun. Failure and pain teach you new lessons. You could have ploughed 20 hours into a base and it will all come to nothing because you forgot to secure the roof and it sprung a leak, or because you didn't think about being attacked from a certain angle and the enemy has got in. And so all of your work has come to nothing. So let's call this third factor the failure factor. So to go over them, the architect factor, the engineering factor, and the failure factor. Okay? So in theory, you could get 10 in each category for a perfect score of 30. All right. With all of that out of the way, let us begin on the list. Now, before we get going, I know there's a Steam sale on at the moment, and I know it's Christmas, so these videos are going to encourage you to spend all your money on Steam games. Well, don't do that. Buy a course at the academic agency. Buy it now. I know you're going to buy the Steam games instead, but I just thought I'd slip this in there. All right, let's get going. So at number 10, I have a game called Aground. It's got nice little cutesy pixel graphics. I mentioned it on the Steam most played list yesterday. It's side-on view, so like some of the others, there is 2D and side-on. And there is a kind of an emphasis on away missions. But this does tick a number of the boxes. You get to design a base. There's crafting. There are some engineering options, although the complexity is not as much as some of the other games on this list. And like I said, there's this emphasis on the away missions. Aground is a decent entry level into the colony management simulator genre, and you could do worse than start there. Number 9 is another side-on game called Kingdom. Now, Kingdom is pretty gentle, and it would score low generally on the engineering factor, but it makes up for it with some of the, it's chill. There are fairly set places that you can put your things, but there is quite, like, the invasions ramp up surprisingly quickly in Kingdom. There's a number of these. There's one set in the 80s. There's one, there's a few different ones that you'll find if you whack in Kingdom into Steam. But it's a nice chill game. Again, towards the bottom of this list because it doesn't have particularly high failure rate. Although you do lose fairly frequently, I would say. But yeah, it kind of lacks some of the complexity of the later games. Number 8 is Songs of Six. Now, this is one that I probably ought to spend more time playing, but it does give you scope to build pretty epic bases. It's got a fantasy setting. There's a kind of there's a city, more of a city builder element in this one. But of the there's quite a lot of these games on Steam. Like there's a number I mentioned yesterday, like Rise of Ruins and Lords and Villains and so on and so forth. But I think Songs of Six is one of the ones which has the greatest potential to become an all-timer. I can just kind of see there's a level of complexity there that gives it possibilities. Although, like I say, I do need to spend more time in it myself. Number 7, Like Aground, is another side-on, and this is Craft the World. Now this would score at least a 6 out of 10 in each of the categories I outlined. The architect factor, the engineering factor, and the failure factor. Again, like Kingdom, in fact, it has a number of similarities with Kingdom because your base is attacked at night time, as it is in Kingdom, and it's sometimes attacked from both sides. And there's a kind of tower defense element, as in Kingdom as well. And it's 2D, it's side on. But they can, when those attacks get big enough, they can ruin even the best of bases. So you have to beef up security and Craft the World. It's also kind of lets you build above ground, which I quite like in games. I like the element where you've got some of the base below ground and some of the base above ground. It's a good game. You can build big towers, you can build, burrowed down. There's all sorts of danger that can come up. There's a very deep tech tree as well in Craft the World. I've got plenty of hours in here. It ticks all of the boxes. Probably maybe scores a little bit less on the engineering factor. Because there aren't that many kind of complex kind of chains or mechanisms you can build. So maybe maybe it's a little bit less on the engineering front, but still an excellent game. Number 6 is pretty maxed out on that engineering front. It's a 10 out of 10 on the engineering factor, and that is Factorio, basically autism simulator. You can lose many an hour just getting caught up in that kind of complex supply chain that you're trying to get going, and you're trying to make it all automated, etc. I'm not sure what the failure factor is on Factorio because you can kind of mess up and go back and delete, and I can't remember if anything actually comes and tries to kill you in Factorio or what the loss condition is in that game. Maybe I misread. It's been a while since I played it, but it's again one of those games where if you really get into it, you can lose days and nights playing Factorio because it just it activates that part of the brain. Of course, there is the architect factor too, but I find that the Factorio base tends to become quite sprawling, quite naturally, partly because of the way that the resources are spaced out, and I guess part of your design might be making it look neat, so it's aesthetically pleasing to look at your base. Mine, for whatever reason, organically they tend to sprawl, the Factorio base. Number 5, a little bit different from some of the other games here, in that it has more realistic graphics. It's not side-on or top-down, but it is a fantastic and deep game called Medieval Dynasty. Many different ways to make, survive, make money, earn a living. There's a pretty deep tech tree in there. You can actually take on, some people looking at this may be thinking, like, hold on, that doesn't look like your typical colony management simulator, but it is, because you recruit peasants to your little out-of-town village, and, that you can build up over time. There are different skills. There's fishing, there's hunting, there's trapping animals, there's farming. You can raise cows and sheep and pigs and all sorts of things. It's got a lot of the same elements as the other games on this list, right? It just looks different. Where it probably has less is in the engineering element. There's but there is some engineering you have to do, but it probably scores. If Factorio is a 10 out of 10 in that, Medieval Dynasty is probably like a 3 or a 4, and it scores higher in the other elements. Number 4 is Prison Architect. This one actually designed around the idea that you're a warden of a prison, and this basically has all of the elements. I would say it's a 7 out of 10 in the engineering. It's maybe an 8 out of 10 in the failure. Your prisoners can riot. Your prisoners can start killing each other. Your prisoners can melt down. They can do all sorts of things. And there is I would say it's a 10 out of 10 on the base design building element, because part of it is, do you have one large complex, one large building with many different components, or do you have separate buildings? If you have separate buildings, how are the prisoners going to go from building to building? Do you have your staff close by, or do you have them far away? Have you thought about the plumbing? Have you thought about the electricity? What happens if a prisoner gets in there? I mean, there's all sorts of things to think about in Prison Architect. So it's a pretty good example of this genre, and is top tier. Number 3, speaking of top tier, is Oxygen Not Included. This has a 10 out of 10 on the engineering. I would say it has a 9 out of 10 on the architect factor. It only loses that 1 because it doesn't let you go outside like Craft the World. Or if it does, I haven't got to the bit where you get to go outside yet. There is a DLC that I haven't bought yet, a space DLC, so maybe that addresses that. But really, and there's a huge failure factor in Oxygen Not Included, where you can, through your own idiocy, basically end up poisoning everybody, or end up starving, or there's a lot of ways that you can fail. So it's pretty much a 10 out of 10 across the board, apart from maybe on the base design side. I'm taking a mark off because you're stuck inside. But there are a lot of things, there are a lot of problems that present themselves immediately. How do you deal with the fact that your little guys need to use the toilet? Okay, so if you don't build a toilet straight away, they're going to end up pissing everywhere. And that urine has germs in it, and those germs can cause a food infection and end up killing everybody from deadly diseases. So you need to find out a way of dealing with the toilet situation. Now you've got your toilets up and running. Well, how are you going to get the polluted water away? Now you've got that up and running. What do you do with that polluted water, and how do you stop it from killing everybody? You're underground, so you guys don't have oxygen. How do you generate enough oxygen for everybody to breathe? Once you've solved that problem, are there other deadly gases around, and how do you deal with that? Etc, etc, etc. So, yeah, it's a 10 out of 10 on the engineering factor, without doubt. But that spills into everything else, and there's always this sense that you're about to lose the whole base, especially when the complexity starts getting too much for you to calculate. Number 2 is RimWorld, which pretty much has perfected this genre. It has 10 out of 10 on the architect front. It has 10 out of 10 on the engineering front, and it has 10 out of 10 on the failure factor. RimWorld is rock solid, and you can pick different storytellers. So even if you start getting really good, you can just ramp up the difficulty a bit. With the ideology and the royalty and so on, there's a lot of complexity in there as well. Quite a lot that it simulates at this point. And it doesn't quite have the complex engineering problems that Oxygen Not Included kind of throws at you. But it does, like, as you're designing that base, it will throw up its own problems. How do you deal with, various different issues? Like, you need to, there's all sorts of things. There's supply problems and so on and so forth. So RimWorld is pretty much a 10 out of 10 in this category, and it would be the greatest game in this category were it not for the existence of the granddaddy of them all, the most complex game ever made, the most incredible game ever made. It is like an 11 out of 10 in each of these categories that I've given here, and that is Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress is just a superlative game. One of the things it has over all of the others, most of the others are just on one level, so RimWorld doesn't have an upstairs or a downstairs. Oxygen Not Included is side on, so it doesn't have depth. Dwarf Fortress is built on cubes, tiny little cubes, right? And it has Z levels. It goes up 100 and it goes down 100, right? So if you can imagine, the grid that you're playing with is a massive, is massive, basically. The game world is so much bigger. And that means that when you're designing your fortress, your fortress can have 10 floors, and each floor can have a dedicated purpose. And each one of those floors comes with its own challenges too. How you're going to get water down there, how you're going to get the water to make the floor wet for the farm, for example. How are you going to sort out your food supply, your drink supply? How you're going to get enough metal to, smelt the stuff that you need, where you're going to get the power from and the heat from to do that, etc., etc., etc. It is just an amazing game and deserves its crown as the best ever colony management sim. All right, I hope you enjoyed this, folks. Pick up a course at the academic agency. Hope you continue to enjoy your Christmas. And, of course, if you're not watching this at Christmas time, enjoy your week anyway. And I'll see you tomorrow, where I'll be talking about the roguelike deck builder. If you liked this video, be sure to like and subscribe. You can join the channel for thousands of hours of past shows in the archive and hundreds of videos. If you have any questions, you can leave a super chat or a super thanks, and I'll be sure to pick it up during my weekly office hours, which run every Tuesday afternoon. I also provide courses at the academic agency, which I encourage people to buy. Thousands of students now have taken the Trivium to improve their skills in writing, logic, and rhetoric. Just 3 of many courses available. Buy it now. But most importantly of all, friends, get out.